The call to order the Open Space Committee meeting of January 4th. It's 4:30. We are meeting virtually only today. And the first item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes. If anybody's had any changes to those minutes or corrections, or do they stand as is?
I have something to
Sorry, go ahead, Helen.
you want me to go? Okay. I wasn't at that meeting, but I'm not mentioned anywhere as absent or present. So I thought you ought to put me on there.
Yeah.
As being absent.
Okay.
And then I have a comment to make about the general comment about the minutes, and if that would be a good time, unless somebody has some corrections to go first.
I just have a tiny correction. My name is spelled with a Y, not an E. Karyn.
Okay. So we have Helen was not there, not mentioned, as absent, and a spelling for Karen.
So will you allow me to make a comment? You want to, pass the minutes, and then may I make a comment?
Sure, let's pass the minutes. So since there's a small change, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, those stand. And now I'll turn to Helen for her comments.
Okay, Heather is not there, but she'll hear my first comment on the recording. Heather, you do such a great job. For instance, my comment says that at the end of each discussion, and then the minutes move on to the next item, I think there's a slight omission that we should consider so that we can have a better outcome for our minutes. For instance, as I read them, because I wasn't there specifically, I get no idea as to how you ended that conversation at that particular meeting. Did you intend for it to come forward and be discussed further? Did you intend to close the discussion and say, let's move on this and let's do such and such and such and such? We are leaving, I think, so many things open-ended. And that's where my concern is. And I wanted to say this, especially before we got into our agenda today, because we are going to be dealing with some documents that we want to consider passing on as to how we affect our work. So I hope that's taken in a positive way. It's just adding something to the way we end an item of discussion at any given meeting. Have something to follow, last comment to say, send this to so-and-so, write this letter, whatever it is, say, discuss it next meeting. It needs to have some kind of,
an action item.
Yeah. So what I'm also wanting to say to Heather is she does an excellent job of, not editorializing. She does a wonderful job. She states the facts. She writes in the meetings everything that is said by the members, the pertinent information. But if I'm asking for a subjective item, I'm glad Heather doesn't put it in there. If she has had any indication of how the committee has ended their discussion, what has been the general feeling, or what's to be done next if there is. So if that is enough, I move it for discussion or comment.
Well, I would just sum it up by saying, because it's been a while since we met. So when I read these, I see it says that Wendy, or Ms. Maxuda stated it would be a good idea to have the town manager's office. But I guess was that a takeaway, which I guess I didn't do, and that you're saying that we should just highlight, if there's a takeaway that we're going to bring back for the next meeting, just be clear about that. I think that's what I'm hearing you say, Helen.
Correct. Every subject we discuss has to have something to tell all of us, as well as those who are not there, how we want to move forward with that particular subject.
Okay, so that's a good point taken.
Helen, I have a question for you. I think you make a good point too, and I just want to make sure I understand you. So right now I'm looking at the minutes and item 4 on co-branding opportunity with Hometown National Park. The last sentence says Mr. Kearney recommended that it be simplified on the website so it's easy to understand. Would you take that further and say,
and we should have a way of hearing an execution after that.
Yeah. So that would be done by X date by Y person. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe, if that's what we need to say in order to have that next step take place.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so we'll just have that as a kind of a try to highlight that, so maybe they are put in the minutes that way on the to-dos.
We can just remind ourselves, each other, at the end of a discussion, the takeaway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If that's what you want to do, without having to make a formal rule about the minute taking. It has nothing to do with the person who's taking the minutes. It has more to do with how we, the ones who are discussing a subject, want to end it up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next topic, I guess you don't have cover sheets like we do, is to look at the native plant policy and to kind of discuss that. I think that's where we are with this. Right. I'm going to look at Susan and Marjorie for like nodding, and you guys.
Yeah, I can take it, Wendy. I put together a native plant policy based on what I've seen from other towns, especially Newtown had put together a native plant policy that I thought made a lot of sense, especially given that the town had adopted the pollinator pathway or pollinator friendly town. And I thought it'd be good for the town itself to have a policy. Often, things are planted just because a plant needs to be put in place. There's no rhyme or reason to why a plant is chosen. So I thought it would be better to have a policy for the town. Newtown's was the most complete, but I know East Granby has just passed a town sort of general policy for on native plants, and I think Canton is working on one or has a partial policy for that. So it seems to go hand in hand with our pollinator pathway, especially since the native plants are the ones that support our native insects and native pollinators. So I thought this was something that the town could adopt. It would keep the town from potentially putting in things that really have very little use ecologically. It's no harder to plant the native plants. Sometimes it's harder to find them, but it would bring awareness to, what we're actually doing with our plantings around town.
Marjorie, I think this is wonderful, and I'm probably somebody who's overexcited about it, but somewhere in there it says, I found it, care should be taken to source plants and seeds that have not been treated with neonicotinoids. And is that the best we can do? We can't say you can't do it. I mean, I would just love to get rid of them altogether.
Well, I don't think there are that many native plants that are treated with neonicotinoids. I think it's mostly the annuals.
Okay.
I don't know that we're going to be planting any seeds. That would be unusual for the town to. The native plants and the native seeds are not treated with neonicotinoids.
Okay, I didn't know that. All right, good. I love it.
But good point.
So can you, Marjorie or Susan or Helen, someone remind me, or Tom, what drove us? Was this something that we had plans to do? And forgive me if I've forgotten since October or the meeting before that, that we were working on this to create a.
Yeah, we've discussed this for many months. It got dropped off the agenda, but we've been working on this actually for years. And it did go hand in hand, as I said, with the pollinator pathways and the pollinator friendly town. The native plants are just so much better. I mean, the plants and the insects co-evolved with each other for thousands of years, and if not longer. And it would just make sense that this is the way to go. We have such a problem, and a growing problem. The other thing we should be discussing at some point in the future is an invasive plant policy. There's so many things in town that have become contaminated by invasive plants, and it's only a problem that's growing. So if you plant a native plant, you don't ever have to worry about it becoming an invasive plant because it's supposed to be here in the first place. It's not by nature, by native, it's not, it can't become an invasive plant. But since plants are the basis of the food chain, it supports the rest of the ecosystem. It just seems like this would be a sensible thing for the town to take the lead. And again, it's not harder to plant the native plants. It just requires some thoughtfulness on our part, and the town can be the leader for the community. So it was something we have discussed before. It just hasn't been discussed in the last few, meetings.
Yeah, it's not particularly burdensome for us, Wendy. I mean,
Okay.
we've been more or less doing this as a town. I don't want to speak for Public Works, but I believe they have as well. For the last few years. So, we've been making a conscious effort to do this, and it's nothing new, and it does align well with the pollinator initiative. I think at the Board of Selectmen meeting where we discussed the pollinator pathway, I believe this came up at that point and there was support for it then. And I believe in the Park and Rec Open Space Master Plan, this was something that was mentioned as well, as a recommendation, and that toward planting native species.
Yeah.
And there are exceptions in it, where, golf, obviously commercial places like the golf course or athletic fields. There are certain turfs that stand up better, certain turf that stands up better or is more applicable to the use of those that maybe aren't native. But when we landscape around our buildings and parks and things like that, this makes sense.
Right. It's also a goal of the POCD. The past one, and hopefully going forward as well. So, but we didn't have a town policy, so we thought it was time to get one. To develop.
Guys, one reason I joined this committee is because I'm so proud of our town for the work of this committee. And I don't know anything about politics, but Wendy, I hope that you run again next time. And when you do, there's so many great things you can talk about, like our bicycle-friendly roads, this particular thing. I mean, I think it makes us such an attractive town. And if I were in your shoes, I'd be so proud to mention some of these things if you're in a debate or a conversation or what have you. So go for it, girl.
I was like, this is not a political campaign meeting, so let's just take that out of the table here. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay. Yeah, just as like a kind of bigger picture message, this native plant policy is sort of a piece of what I've sort of conceptualized and we've talked about in the commission as like our town toolkit. Like, how do we take care of all of these assets in our town? And we started thinking about this a long time ago with, some of the kind of major things that we have, like the Wild and Scenic River. We have the National Scenic Trail going through town. We have the first old growth forest in the network in town, like all of these things and all these like historical resources and all this stuff. Like, how do we responsibly take care of all these things? And one kind of role model, I think, is our national park system. Mm-hmm. Which is dedicated to cultural and recreational and natural resources and, national and natural heritage. And, thinking about how do we translate those values to taking care of all of those things in our town. And so my goal, my vision is that we put together this set of documents and we can say to other towns, like, we spent years developing this as like an aspirational and practical set of policies so that we all feel like we're taking care of, our community. So that's kind of like the bigger picture message. So this is like all these little pieces that we keep on bringing up at every meeting. They're all part of that bigger picture.
This is Helen. May I speak?
Sure, Helen.
Thank you. What I think this committee has done most importantly is that it has a subcommittee that puts out these documents for us and brings them to fore. So I'd like to ask, number one, if one question and then make a statement. Is the subcommittee happy with this draft as it is? Do you have anything you want to add, or is this ready to move? And that's my question to the subcommittee. If you say it's ready to move, then I'm ready to move it and say that we have other drafts to go through this afternoon, but I am ready to move this one along to the Board of Selectmen. So let's go to the next draft if you are ready to. But I just didn't want to leave this discussion without having some action, comment.
So I had a couple questions on the policy. So as a fiscally responsible leader, and I'm going to ask just a couple questions just to reiterate this so it's on the record and I can represent it at the board. So Tom, you're saying that this pretty much is what we do today. The question I have is, I've heard it's hard to get native plants. Does this create any issue on finding plantings for the areas that we need to cover? One, and two, does it increase the cost of filling these municipal spaces with native plants going forward in the long run? So is there a major impact on the cost of native plants versus any old plant? I'm sure the benefit of natives are much greater, but I was looking at the percentages that were stated in here, and I just wanted to make sure that they're realistic, that we could attain that percentage of native plants for these categories, and B, the cost would not be prohibitive.
Yeah, I'll start. Then Marjorie and Susan and Karen, you want to jump in after me? I think most of our local vendors are now adding this to their inventory, adding natives to their inventory. They've been doing that for a few years. As this is not a new initiative, just the town's doing. This is something that as a whole everyone should be trying to do, and it's been in the news a lot the last few years. So I believe that more people are trying to do that, and if more people are trying to do it, the vendors are going to keep these items in stock, which will bring the cost down. Everything, it's hard to say because costs are all over the place right now. What something's one day and it's going to be a different next week, but as a whole, yes, maybe they're slightly more expensive right now, but as this takes off, and which I think we all think it will, that will lower the cost, just like anything else. It becomes more available. But we make a commitment to try to buy from our local vendors when it's possible to do so. If obviously they don't have something we need and can't get in a timely manner, we'll go elsewhere. But if that answers your question, and I think I picked up, I'm always learning from this group, but I'll take something that Marjorie said before. By buying natives, they're likely to last longer because they're more appropriate to the climate here. So we in the long run, we would probably save money on a plant that's going to last longer than something that's not specifically going to thrive in our local climate here. Did I do that? Say that right, Marjorie?
That's right. That's right.
All right. Thank you.
It's also, there are more, we have in Connecticut, we have some native plant nurseries who are supplying these things. And the more we support them, the more support they get, the more they're able to provide. But this is something that, the time has come, shall we say. I mean, UConn just recently put out a wonderful guidebook for municipalities and how to choose their native plants for various uses. So I think 20 years ago, this would have been a harder issue. But I think the time has come for this.
Okay. So I think it sounds, Susan, go ahead.
I just want to, so Tom and Marjorie just made most of the points that I was thinking of in response to your question, but I have one more in that bringing in plants with soil from other areas can carry really significant risks. And one of the really big risks right now is bringing in these, almost invisible eggs of horrible things like jumping worms and other things that destroy forests, and we have no way to get rid of them. So, mitigating the risk of bringing in bad stuff itself is a huge benefit.
That's a very good one.
There are ecological costs.
Okay. So it sounds like we can, Tom, you tell me, or you guys tell me, we could make a motion that this is ready to move to the Board of Selectmen?
That would be the next step for this board to do, yes.
Okay, would somebody like to make that motion?
I moved that we do that, so.
Oh, you did.
Whatever you say, the wordage, so be it.
If somebody can make a second on that?
I'll second.
The second? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of moving this policy forward, say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay, so policy moves forward. Gives me something to add to our agenda later.
There you go.
Or whatever.
Okay.
I think there was an intent, Wendy, to do an open space themed meeting in January. I think it's toward the back end of the month. So I think that's where these will appear.
Oh, that's
later.
great. Good. Yeah, it's not next week.
No.
Okay. Yeah, it's nice to bundle them up too, because then we're all thinking in that space. And okay. So the next item is the recommended mowing practices in the open space.
Okay.
And again,
This is another one that we've been talking about for a while. It got dropped off the agenda, but I was able to look at various policies for various groups like Audubon and the pollinator pathways groups to look at how are we managing our fields. Traditionally, we've been mowing them once a year. Tom, what's the time that usually they're mowed?
So I got to circle my head around it. Typically, we mowed after the first frost.
Yeah.
So the Barn Door Hills Triangle after the first frost, Case Circle after the first frost, the meadow in Ethel Walker, I think it's off of, I can't remember the street, off of Longview. There's a meadow over there that we normally would do after the first frost.
Okay.
That's when we had been mowing it. The Meadowwood area on Firetown Road that's not being farmed right now. That one, the intent again, it would have been mowed after the first frost. This policy is going to dictate that a couple of those spaces get we attempt to mow those in the spring. I think that's going to be a little bit of a trial and error thing.
Yeah.
For the first couple of times out, based on the timeline when it's recommended. The triangle does have some wet areas, and as long as the contractor that we use doesn't have who has the equipment to do this type of mowing doesn't have issues with it as far as getting stuck and that kind of thing, then that's what we'll do. So this year we did forego the mowing of the Barn Door Hills, both sides of Barn Door Hills Triangle and the Meadowwood Firetown area. We did not mow those this fall, knowing that this is probably coming down the pike, and we were going to attempt to try to get on that schedule of doing it in the spring.
So we've been in pollinator pathways has been discussion with town staff and trying to figure out either to get away from the annual mowing for all of the fields, because a lot of the pollinators actually winter over in some of those grasses. And so the recommendation for mowing practices for pollinator fields is that you mow in early spring or late winter, preferably when the ground's frozen and not thawed and you're going to get stuck. But so there is a little bit of an error, guesswork in that, but not to mow immediately after the plants set their seeds and the insects are just hibernating. So if we're going to be pollinator friendly, it doesn't make sense to mow them all down at the wrong time of the year. So trying again to come up with a policy. And I know Orlando had said that, for the grassland bird habitat, I think there's really only one big field that really fits the grassland habitat, and that's the Barn Door Hills Triangle area. Is the only one that's big enough. So, but I know Audubon, the Hartford Audubon would be happy to help out trying to identify the birds. They're already chomping at the bit, I think, to get involved in that project. But it would just be good to have a policy. And I know the National Resource Conservation Service, I don't know if it works for towns, but they actually have money that they give to people to not mow their fields as frequently. So I'm not sure if that's something that the town can look into, but they're trying to, the NRCS is trying to get people not to mow as frequently So every other year is a better policy. And that would actually save money for the town if we're not mowing as frequently. So some of the pollinator pathway groups, we can do all, alternate years. So that would be a cost saving for the town.
Helen here.
Go ahead, Helen.
Susan, you go first if you wish.
Well, I was just going to follow up on that. And some of the other strategies are like mowing half the field so you don't mow them all down. So like every other year you mow one half of the field. So that's another way to sort of, kind of mitigate the impact.
Yeah, that was one of the things, the Simsbury Land Trust, I'll just jump in here, Helen. One of the things that the Simsbury Land Trust has done is they've numbered their fields, because it's kind of hard to mow half a field sometimes. You don't know where you've left off, and it's hard for the operator sometimes, and especially for the small fields. So if you number the fields, you can mow all the even number fields on the even years and all the odd number fields on the odd years. That's what we're doing with the Simsbury Land Trust fields, and that just makes it simpler. I mean, anything to make it simpler, and
Well, you've provided a suggestion as to how it could be achieved, but I was impressed with the fact that you did that in this particular policy, where you have stated, for instance, about the taking the larger fields and making them into smaller segments and doing them switching off. I'm just impressed that you provided all the possibilities in order to have this be an effective policy.
thank you.
Tom, what's your take? And what's an impact, or if good or bad, to parks?
I would, mowing half a field, it would be difficult because the guy's got to mobilize to get over there. So in the long run, that would probably cost us more to mow half a field. Mowing every 2 years obviously saves a few $1,000s a year. And what we pay to mow some of those larger areas. I've been supportive of this. All we want to know is when we're supposed to mow. that's what's important to us. It does, I'm not trying to be flip when I say that. It's up to the town to tell, just like anything else. If the town wants us to mow, we'll mow. If the town doesn't want us to mow, we won't mow. But we just need to know give us some direction on what they'd like us to do. We've been supportive of the pollinator effort on our side, both on the golf and the park end of things. And if this is another extension of that, that's fine. I think that there are some of those high visible areas, like such as the Barn Door Hills Triangle. There's a lot of people who frequent that area for sunsets and that kind of thing. It's visible to a fair amount of neighbors who go through that area on their way to the center of town. When we don't mow it, it's noticeable. It's people notice, and they let us know, or they call in and say, why isn't it being mowed? And generally, when we've explained to them, those who have called the last few years, we're trying some new things. We're trying to protect the insect habitat that's there, and most people weren't aware of that there's maybe nesting insects during the wintertime. They like it to look. I like a nice clean cut lawn. That's just me, and some people like it that way. I think the no mow zone signs we put up have helped explain some of these things to people, and those have been popular. So there might be, again, some questions directed at the town in the near future when this is not mowed. If we go 2 years, there might be some explaining to do, but that's part of the education process going forward. I don't think a lot of people are going to notice a big difference between 1 year and 2 years, to be honest with you. You look at that field now, it looks like it's been, once the first snow or the first heavy rain or winter or wind comes, and it knocks everything down. For us, we just appreciate having direction. I guess that's more, and if it benefits the environment, that's great too. But we just want to know what we're supposed to do, and when it's suggested, everybody's on the same page as when we should do it.
Helen has one last comment, I think.
Okay.
Hearing all that Tom just said and everything, we always have to consider best practices. Now, sometimes you cannot get to the best practices until you've tried some. So I'm thinking this policy is the beginning of an important procedure that the town has to do to take care of what it now owns and is supposed to be there to take care of it. So it's a beginning. I am sure that as we move into these action parts by staff and so forth, there will be changes as to how we think the best practice should be. So let's just start by, let's say, approving this particular draft as a committee and having it move forward as well.
I just have a question about it. I agree that we could move it forward, but I think it's section A, there's a small Roman numeral 5. It says control invasive plants as much as possible. For those of you who know more about good mowing practices, is that there because these in general might help us control invasives, or is there something more specific as this evolves that could be pointed towards invasive control?
I think that will come under an invasive plant policy as well. And every invasive plant needs to be controlled differently. For instance,
Right.
on the Barn Door Hills Triangle, there is a section of mugwort that should be mowed early and often in the year for quite some time, and then it may need a chemical control. Well, will need a chemical control, but to mow it before it sets seeds and to keep it from setting seeds would be really important. So there's some, so every invasive plant, some will require, the woodies would require just annual mowing, but some of them, you'd have to tailor it to that particular thing. So it's really hard to be specific on that one.
But I'm glad that it's noticed as something that we can work on.
It's an issue.
Okay.
Anytime you have a field, it's going to be an issue.
Okay, good.
Okay, so I just want to get back to a question I have under the pollinator practices. This is the every 2-year mowing, and it talks about the numbered fields. Is that okay, Tom? Does that, you were saying, does that work? Is that how it would be easy enough for you to do that way?
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking about that many fields for us. There's probably 5 at the most. That we're doing, and then we are letting some of our lesser used areas in the, let's say the north end of or eastern end of Curtis Park, where we grow in last year till the end of the season, or areas of the golf course we're letting grow in during the season. Those we will, I think we're gonna have to mow every year. Just some of them are sight line, some of it's just be able to reuse that. They're overflow parking areas like the Curtis Park area, but so we're not talking about we're not going to count to 10 here and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 1 year. Yeah, I don't think it's like that. It's probably an A and B type of situation, or it's just determining what cycle the case. A case circle is an example of a field that's surrounded by homes. If I don't mow, I will probably hear more, or we will hear more from the neighbors on Case Circle, or somebody might take it into their own hands. People who have said they wanted to take it into their own hands because it doesn't get mowed by a certain date. Again, explaining why signage. I guess that signage costs a little bit of money. It's not a lot, but if we're going to mow an area like that every 2 years, we need to explain to them why we're doing it every 2 years.
And it might be maybe a letter to the homeowners in that area.
It may be, yeah. I mean, it is town open space. They shouldn't be maintaining it themselves or anything like that. But it is it's a fairly good sized loop of natural, natural area. It's a nice looking meadow, just like some of our other areas. But we don't have large swaths of this that we're talking. We have a lot of open space in town. Don't get me wrong. We have few thousand acres of it. Most of it is wooded. It's not all meadow.
So this says mow every 2 years, but you're just saying that may not the pollinator habitat.
Yeah, I think these. I mean, I'm looking at these as guidelines or suggested policies, and I think the wording is in here. We all agreed before. It's kind of trial and error and see what works and what doesn't work, but 2 years is great for us. It saves us money. It'll save us some money. Don't get me wrong. I'm good with that. I just
Okay.
think in practice, we have to weather that first storm when people have to get used to it. That's what I was getting at, I guess.
Right. So I guess I'm being exact or not exact in that, do you need wording to say, mow fields every 2 weeks where possible? I just, because it just says mow every 2 years, period. Is that good enough? Is that fine? Are you allowed to vary from that because we're setting this as a policy? Just asking.
That's a good, no, it's a good question.
Maybe we can just say
maybe it should be
approximately.
mow fields every 2 years when feasible or when possible, or so it does give you an out, I guess. I mean, that's.
Yeah, I'm just, you're right. Cause I mean, I just is finite when I read that. So if you're saying that isn't going to happen,
Understood.
I'm just covering everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
I like to live in the gray area too. I do my best work in the gray area.
So
It's also possible you might want to mow every 3 years in some fields. Or you might not get to it. It might be the spring might not be good. The
That's
particular
true.
year you were going to mow, and then,
That's
you just
true.
like, we'll put that off
Yeah.
until.
I mean, who knows? We could get a
Next-
blizzard in 1st of October and never be able to get to it till the following year. So you can't be out there mowing under the snow, right? So.
Yeah.
So, is there any words that we would want that to read differently?
Well, this is an aspirational policy. I
Yep.
mean, it's
Oh, I always feel policy is policy. Like you have to.
no, I mean, the
Why don't we
policy
say
is
just
mow
say
every 2 years.
approximately? Yeah,
Yeah.
why don't we say approximately or
Okay.
something,
All
just to make it a little
Thank
bit,
you.
Flexible.
Thanks, Susan. Okay.
That works for me.
Okay. So any other comments on this policy? Are people comfortable moving this policy forward to the Board of Selectmen?
Yes, I move that we move this policy onto the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, so that one's moving along too. Okay, the next item is the Trop Rock Ridge enabling legislation. And I will turn that over to, yes, Susan is the expert.
that's me.
Yeah.
Whoops, hang on. Oh, I am unmuted, sorry. And I just realized that the co-branding attachment isn't listed as an item on the agenda. So I just want to make a note of that to discuss
Oh.
that at the end too. So this is an enabling legislation that was done, I think in 1998 that we discussed this at the last full meeting and have discussed it subsequently at the working group meetings. I'm sure Simsbury was part of this whole discussion because all of our ridges are listed in it. It was listed in our POCD multiple times about the ridge lines. So it seems like there's this enabling legislation that we just never kind of crossed the T or whatever you call it. I'm not sure exactly how to do that. So the goal today would just be for open space to say, yes, we support this. Like we can't approve it. It would be, I'm sure, the Board of Selectmen or zoning or something like that. And I haven't done enough homework to figure out exactly what that path is. So today, the point was just to bring this from the working group to the full board to say, yes, we agree with pursuing this because it says that we're going to do it in multiple POCDs and all of our ridges are listed in the enabling legislation. It has Hedgehog, Sugarloaf, Onion Mountain. There's a whole list and we're all of our stuff is in there. And it basically just regulates the top of the ridge, the very top, like 150 feet at the very top. And the reason why this is important is because this is considered a very special habitat that we have in Connecticut. I sent out the link last time. It's in this big bulletin on imperiled habitats in Connecticut. And one thing that's special, the Onion Mountain Trap Rock Ridge is the only one in Connecticut that doesn't have a trail that goes exactly down the spine, which allows like special stuff to grow there because it's a very unusual geology and kind of microhabitat that grows on the ridge. So that's kind of the summary, that it's a box that we are part of but never checked.
Okay.
Helen has a comment, of course.
Sure, Helen.
Pitch in. I've been around long enough, been in the planning commission over the years, and it was during the 90s that we got so serious about our open space program, and the ridge issue in Simsbury was always primary in our discussions. And given the facts that I don't have to go over them again, Susan just mentioned them, and we have the most, so to speak, of any town in the state. So I want to advance this by saying this. The Public Act, which enabled the towns to do something to preserve, that was the word, preserve the ridges. And because the Board of Selectmen is our policy-making group, and I think it's our responsibility to put this forward in this packet as well, since we are advisory to the Board of Selectmen, to point out that this is long overdue and slipped through the cracks in one way or another, and it is time for it to be considered as a policy for the town. And one more item. The fact also is already important that it was, so to speak, approved, stamped on, I don't know what you want to say, but in our most recent POCD, which is now under review again, but it made a very strong, positive statement in that document. That was what, 5 years ago? So that I think that's also why I think it is so ready to go before our policymaking board to be considered at this time.
So, Helen, that's all really important. And I want to thank Tom Fitzgerald because he followed up after the meeting we had that this came up and kind of pulled those documents together, which was really helpful. Okay. I would suggest today, we're not going to be able to craft a long statement. We just craft the open space committee or commission. I always forget what we are. Supports this. And then if we so we're going to kind of bundle these issues together, and, I can try and kind of just encapsulate that in a few minutes, a couple minutes at the Board of Selectmen to kind of we can provide them this information that's written, and I'll make a little statement there. And that would allow us to kind of just move this item to be something that we have, whatever they call it, a positive referral or something like that. Would that make sense? Or do we need something more robust than that? I'm asking. That's a question.
My question is maybe to Marjorie, because you've got more experience on the Conservation Commission. Is it this board giving a referral to the Conservation Commission to basically adapt paragraph 4?
Yeah, it hasn't been. I've just written down that Conservation Commission letter. It's probably needed. I know I'm not going to be at the next conservation meeting, but that's something I will bring up for discussion. But I don't, I'm not sure about the timing. But certainly the Conservation Commission would probably give a positive referral to that as well.
Yeah.
So I was interrupted from someone in my house, missed. So this doesn't seem like something that would just come to our board in this state because, right? And now I'm hearing it would have to go. So. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I think it needs to go through the land. Obviously, this is one of the land use boards, but I think it needs positive referrals from all of the land use boards that deal with zoning regulations and that kind of thing, building regulations.
Can I comment, Helen, here? we may have, let's say, past practice taken some of our issues, through the boards. But since we are specifically a committee that is advisory to the Board of Selectmen, I think we need to present this bundle directly to the Board of Selectmen and let them decide how to proceed. Because of the research that we've already done, we can make a presentation. We don't have to send this along to the board with the first selectman and say, present it. This can come with a presentation from the committee. But I think it's because of our status being advisory to the Board of Selectmen, I think that's the way we should do our work and go to them first.
I agree, Helen. And I think then the Board of Selectmen can ask the other commissions, land use commissions, for a letter commenting on it, on their, whether they want to positively refer.
I have one other comment that I think is beneficial for this committee, and that is, as we've been honing our skills of recent years and how to communicate what we think is important, this is a way, as advisory to the Board of Selectmen, when it is brought into the Board of Selectmen's agenda, it is a primo way of educating the community, because it gets out to the community differently through the Board of Selectmen than it does through the other commissions. And I think that's another reason that makes it a strong bond, that we take our work straight to the Board of Selectmen. It serves so many positive ways of conducting our business.
Just as a practical note, I also just think it's really efficient if we have a number of issues, we can kind of like bundle it together, go to one meeting, a couple minutes on each thing, and sort of, then they're starting to get the picture. It's not like a UFO comes by every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
So is it a train? This is a train, not a UFO.
So is this, I'm just trying to get my head around what this is to do. And it's really to say that we support PA 95-239 in relation to our ridge lines. Is that basically all that is needed?
Yeah.
And then we would make sure that planning, whoever, zoning, conservation commission also, because usually it comes up from them to us. That's the direction.
Well, maybe somehow that's how some of the things have fallen through the cracks over the years. So I'm just trying to find a good way, not only to educate the community, but to educate the Board of Selectmen, who are the policymakers.
So here's what I would, I'll say this time. So it sounds like, you want to go?
Yeah, well, there's just one thing. I could think of one example where the Board of Selectmen got positive referrals for the Meadowood acquisition from the land use commissions before actually deciding to go ahead with the purchase of Meadowood. Yeah. That might be an example of something similar to this, I guess.
Well, so what I was going to suggest is, when Susan and we present the policies in that February meeting, you touch on this and you present that this is what the ask is to the board, and we'll have Maria there, right, the town manager. And if Tom's there, we could also invite George or something, and they can suggest if it's best coming from us down or going down up, unless we can do that before then. Yeah. But, if those policies are moving forward and we want to get some traction on this sooner than you can loop through all those boards and commissions, it might be just a good place to put it on the radar. And if it's something we can take up there and make a motion for, we can do that. If it's suggested, we push it down and have it come back up. Tom, are you looking confused, or are you agreeing with me?
No, it makes sense. To me, that makes sense, because I'm kind of stuck on what the best way to do it is.
Yeah.
I can see the way Helen has said it, and I can see the other way where it's, we get a referral to the other boards and get support and then present that kind of thing. But I think, your board ultimately has to be the one who accepts or denies anything. So it
Yeah.
might as well start with you. It might as well come from you guys. So
Yeah, so we put it on the table, see what we're supposed to do with it at that level, and then we'll either do it or we'll do it, and we'll do it either way. So Susan, are you going to be the presenter of these?
I think Marjorie would do the mowing and the native plant one possibly.
Which gets me to when is the next Board of Selectmen meeting?
Well,
I think the one where this will be held, Marjorie, is January 23rd, I think is the date Maria was targeting for this.
23rd. Yep.
Fortunately, I will not be here.
Who is that?
Fortunately or unfortunately?
Unfortunately, I will not be here. I will be out of town. I'll be driving back. But,
Okay. We could try. Karen and I could try, and Karen and Helen and I could try and carry the ball without you. I mean, the policies that we're talking about, the mowing and the native plant ones, are all very, and Tom knows about them too. We've been talking about them forever. Then they're all written out in great detail.
I don't think I need to be there.
Well, you got off the hook this time.
I know.
There's one on the 13th, but we'll try to get
There's
it
no
on
need to wait. There's no need to wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Well, Susan, as a newcomer, I would love to back you up, learn a little bit more about how things are decided. So if there's a role I can play, I'll study up and do any part that I can. Sure.
Yeah. See, think about which topic you might want to cover of our various little topics, and we could each do like a couple of minutes or something.
And it's
like
on.
that.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
sure. Okay.
Okay.
So that's the 23rd. I'll make a note on my calendar to hold that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at mine right now too.
What time are the meetings? 7 or something?
And I'll be here. So
6 p.m.
I have a meeting at 7. Is that a problem?
If you do a presentation up front, no. And then if we choose to, we'll probably, that's how I would see it. You would do a presentation and then we would have an action item later where we could vote
Okay.
on what you presented.
Because I have a meeting at 7 that night too. So, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't need to be there for the adoption part or the decision part of it. You just need to be there for the presentation. I will be there likely for the whole meeting anyway. So
Okay. That's fine. And related to that, if the board members have questions, would they ask them then right after the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good.
They don't
That'll
usually
work.
ask questions in the discussion phase. It's usually after the presentation.
Okay, perfect. I think that'll work out.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so just to, as Helen said, wrap this up, I move that we send a positive recommendation for the Trap Rock Ridge enabling legislation to the Board of Selectmen.
Second.
Oh, okay.
Was I allowed to do that?
Sure.
Okay, I wasn't.
You made the motion. We got a second.
Okay,
So we could say, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And no, there's no nays here. So that will go in the bundle for the presentation with what do we do with the Trap Rock Ridge legislation? Okay.
Guys, I'm embarrassed, but I really want to know that I don't know what happened with the Trap Rock situation in Canton that was so controversial. Did a resolution happen there?
I think it was voted down and there's been nothing since then, really.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay, thank you.
It's voted away.
Yeah.
The next item is the dark skies. I'm trying to find somebody wants it.
That was kind of me and Karen. But then it became super time sensitive because there's an official briefing paper on behalf of the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters on dark skies and light pollution. So long story short, there's a kind of draft handout that came in the packet on dark skies and light pollution. And so I've been in touch with Leo Smith, who's the Northeast Director for the International Dark Sky Association, also in touch with Rob LaFrance from Audubon, There's a number of groups that are really concerned about this, and dark skies, I know, was in our, I didn't ask Tom to do another research, not you, Tom, the other Tom, one of the other Toms, to do a research project on what was in our previous POCD, and I haven't had a chance to track that down. But we did have a dark sky policy. So this isn't necessarily this isn't written up right now like a policy. This is just another sort of kind of public education issue, but it is something that could, I think, be in our upcoming POCD. And there are other towns with policies. That's, I think, what Marjorie might be mentioning, that we could emulate, but we haven't. This is like one of the next items in our working group, basically.
Yeah, if I can do join in, the town of Newtown and Stamford have put together. Newtown has a policy and Stamford has actual regulations. And in our last POCD, it was identified that zoning should be working on dark sky regulations for the town. So that was identified in our last POCD. And I have put together a compilation of Newtown and Stamford. I was hoping it was distributed at this meeting, but it didn't get through. I've had a lot of things bounce back from the town website, but the or email. But anyways, we're looking at that through conservation, and we're hoping to make a referral or a recommendation to zoning, because zoning is the one that's called out in the POCD to come up with regulations for dark skies. So I figured we take the ones that have already been gone through the lawyers in Stamford and see what, and I think the town's looking at it, or hopefully the town will look at it. But it's gone. I've sent it to George McGregor, and I've sent it to, I can't remember who else. But at least we have a working draft for some regulations for that, and hopefully zoning will take it up and complete that task that is mentioned in the POCD.
So am I hearing that this is really a zoning, to move this to zoning, and it would be George, and then Dave Ryan's the chair to get the discussion on their agenda to work on regulations for this?
That's what it says in the POCD.
Okay.
Helen here. I have a comment about how the POCD, I think, is almost more important than maybe timing. Says zoning needs to attend to it first, but this is not a Connecticut or local problem. This is a universal problem. So I think the POCD needs to address this as well, if not first, before zoning.
Well, has anybody reached out to, I mean, we're just looping in with the POCD changes right now. They're kind of moving on them, right?
Yeah, conservation we'll be discussing the POCD, their recommendations for changes for POCD. And as a result, we'll be pushing forward some new things. I know Susan wants to add some things to that as well. But yeah, we're trying to be preemptive in our comments. Often we're, at the last stage of the thing. So we're trying to be ahead, because this is not the full review of the POCD. This is a partial review. So we're trying to get some things into the POCD, but it was already in the POCD for dark skies.
Okay.
So, and it was an action item that the zoning is the one that promulgates the regulations for that. So we're just trying to speed it up by giving them examples from Newtown and Stamford.
So should we be sending, I know I'm repeating, I think, should we be sending, like, is it via email, a letter to George and Dave Ryan that this is included in the POCD and that it's really, we need regulations around this and that they need to take it up?
If the Board of Selectmen did, that would be helpful. I know the conservation is going to be making a recommendation that they adopt something similar to the ones that we're sending, or they review them. I mean, they're the ones that have the final say on it. But if the Board of Selectmen would say, it's been listed as an action item in the POCD and we recognize this as an issue, I think that would be very helpful.
Well, I'm not sure. So that's what I'm asking you. I don't know if that's something if it's in the POCD that planning should do because it's in their POCD.
Well, perhaps, but it is as a townwide policy or regulate. Maybe planning should. I mean, it's too bad Erin's not here today, or we can reach out to Erin. Maybe we can reach out to Erin and ask her. I can send her the things. I will send what, we haven't reviewed them at the Conservation Commission properly, but eventually we can send them to Erin in the planning. We have had a joint meeting between conservation and planning about the POCD and some of the things, and we're going to be sending them a list of comments and suggestions for POCD, and one of them can also include, here are some regulations that other towns have put together that we could adopt.
Okay.
And I don't know who would, that's the sort of a common theme of this meeting is, how does this all happen? We come up with ideas, and how's it get moved forward? So we can send it that it's in the POCD already that zoning's to do this. So we're just trying to help.
Okay. I'm going to put it on my list too, because I don't know either. So I'm.
Yeah, and in terms of open space, I mean, I just think we're also trying to put together this sort of toolkit of educational materials, because zoning or statewide regulations are only going to address state and maybe municipal applications. It doesn't address private property. And one of the big issues is that everyone is looking to replace their lights with LED lights. When all these LED lights rolled out, there was no recommendation about what the lumens were, what the color temperature should be, or anything for installing these particularly for outdoor use. And it's even an issue with indoor use in big buildings. The birds are crashing into the buildings because people leave the lights on. So it's kind of a big ball of wax. And in fact, we didn't even know how bad it was, because the spectral remote sensing of light pollution coming from the earth was not detecting the wavelength that LEDs give off. They've just used a new method in Europe to detect the change in light pollution, and it is massive. So it's really like a major public education issue, and people think, oh, more light is better. But if there's some little factoids on that fact sheet, but the problem with super bright lights, it's better to have kind of like low level, consistent illumination outside. When you install super bright lights in like alleys, what you create is like very, very bright glaring areas and then super dark areas. And it's actually more dangerous. Your eyes don't adjust to the night. It's bad for so many species. So what I see as a real kind of irony is everyone's so concerned about planting native plants in their yard, and then they're killing all the bugs and butterflies and birds with these super bright lights that they leave on all night. So, that's the issue.
Okay.
Just to be like real blunt about it. And actually, a motion sensor is more effective at deterring. If you're worried about crime, a motion sensor is more detective. If you're worried about seeing, something dimmer is better than a super bright glaring thing. And actually all these LEDs are dimmable. So this is a way to kind of
the new ones.
Yes, a way to mitigate the problem that exists right now is to put dimmers on some of these lights that are installed and make sure we don't install more that are super bright and on all night.
Susan, you are allowed to make blunt comments.
Just trying to be efficient here.
Are probably the most well-informed blunt comments that I know.
Trying to keep things rolling. So yeah, what are we going to, now I'm back to what are we doing about this? the question. It's going to zoning, right? We're getting, what did we say we're doing?
Well, conservation is going to be sending to planning and to zoning draft town policy for the lighting. And then there's going to have to be education. Okay. It's going to have to be education.
Okay. And I was supposed to work with Tom and go over stuff to add to the website. which I didn't do yet, so I didn't do my homework, but this kind of stuff, like this attachment to this, is all just kind of pulling together now. So that's still on my agenda, Tom. I didn't forget about you.
Yeah, I wasn't here, so don't worry about it.
Okay,
So-
good.
And another thing just to throw in here, because this also, you could also kind of tack this on to the January 23rd thing and just say, even include this in the packet so it goes out to everybody, and we can say that it's being, you know, the path that it's going on through conservation. If somebody has a higher level aspiration of moving it somewhere else, then we could do that there.
Yeah, perfect. That's what I was
Or
planning.
even if the board of selectmen recognizes this is something that I mean, if they could vocalize it, that was something recognized in the POCD, that this is an action item.
But we could, yeah, that would be good to say too. You know, I don't know, like, I remember talking about this last time, and I know there's cost issues to people and things like that, because people want lights in their yard. So some of this is probably, you really have to push the benefits of it and get that out there.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last item, not number 6, which is not on the list, but the co-branding. I'm going to turn that over to Susan.
Right. So at the back of the packet is the official kind of co-branding logo that I got from the Homegrown National Park. Oh, thank you, Tom. So this would be, we talked about kind of a launch later this spring where we would put it on our website. And Kelly said he would help with kind of like social media, and this kind of ties together the whole native plant, pollinator pathway, ecology kind of message under like a bigger national umbrella that a lot of people are very aware of and has gotten a lot of press. And we would be the first town to do this co-branding. So that's, you know, kind of like a little feather in our cap.
That'd be good.
Okay.
And I can include this in the Board of Selectmen thing on the 23rd as well.
Yeah, because I think I might have remember asking, what does it mean by even saying this and aligning with them? And that would probably be a question that we would want answered.
Yep. Yeah, I'll be prepared to talk about that.
Okay. Okay. So it doesn't look like there's any other agenda items, and it doesn't say any new business has an agenda item. So I think we can ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Tom. And see you guys next time.